When The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker was first announced, I was admittedly one of those people who wasn't immediately sold on the art style. It wasn't the direction I thought things were going in, but of course, all of that went right out the window once I actually played the game, and I think that it's aged incredibly well. This was also the very first game I ever played a randomizer of, and growing up with a GameCube to Game Boy Advance link cable, I have some very fond memories of playing this game with my brother. And by that, I mean there was a whole lot of this. But as the game was made available for a brand new generation, I realized that I've never actually beaten it 100% before. So today, we're not only going to fix that, but we're going to go above and beyond too, because this is not just a Retro Achievements video, we will be doing absolutely everything that there is to do. So without further ado, it's time to begin our adventure. F me, I need to order a PAL copy of the game to use Retro Achievements. One moment. Alright, we're back. I have the correct version of the game this time, and it even came with a bonus disc. So now it's time to begin our Wind Waker journey for real this time. After gaining control of Link, we break our legs backflipping off the watchtower, and then crawl under Grandma's house to find both the chest and our first achievement. Then we smash Sue Belle's pot and pay the full fine for achievement number 2, and then we have our first Missable. We have to wrangle all 3 pigs to get some extra money, but you can't crawl or go indoors. So either chase them into the water first, or get them trapped up against a wall in order to grab them without needing to sneak up on them. Then with all those extra rupees, we go ahead and spend it all at Beetle's because we eventually need to get both coupons from him, which means 60 total purchases. Since we eventually need to map out the entire sea chart as well, we go ahead and stock up on a ton of bait. Then before too much longer, we have another Missable achievement for saving Tetra without using your sword or leaving the area. But don't let the fact that it's a 25 pointer fool you, this one really isn't that bad. Just let one of them defeat the other, and then throw rocks at the first one. Then once we wrap up the prologue and set sail, we'll have our first of 4 speedrun achievements, all of which will be missable. Here we'll have 20 seconds to clear Nico's first obstacle course, which is extremely generous on time once you understand the controls. The other 3 will take a bit more practice, but we don't have to worry about those yet, because our next stop is the Forsaken Fortress, where our next Missable is pretty easy, finding every single treasure chest before you get your sword back. Which means that now's a good moment to talk about the 3 heart run. This is pretty standard in Zelda Retro Achievement sets, and Wind Waker goes one step further by also limiting you to 1 bottle, the one that you get from Medley before Dragon Roost Cavern. Grabbing a heart piece is perfectly fine, but you can't grab or complete a new full container. But we just got our first heart piece here, we're forced to get another one for helping the teacher because it ultimately leads to a Triforce piece, and then there's a 3rd one in the mail fairly early on, so my entire allowance gets used up pretty quickly. And while I could theoretically reset after getting the achievement, and technically avoid the mailbox for most of the game, I really didn't want to get too convoluted, and it's pretty easy to avoid nearly every other heart piece, because you won't find any in any other dungeon chest. Moving on, we get our sword back, get launched for the 2nd time in 30 minutes, and now we're at Windfall Island. After buying the sail and completing the hide and seek side quest for our 2nd heart piece, we then need to free the heinous criminal Tingle. Not only is freeing him important to completing the main story, but freeing him also grants us access to 2 of the biggest pieces of side content in our journey to complete everything: the Tingle Tuner and the Picto Box. We'll be talking more about the Picto Box later, but for now we'll do the first side quest with it, visiting Lenzo, becoming his new assistant, and completing various photography tasks. Given that I've played the game before, I already preemptively took all the photos needed, which probably gives Lenzo the impression that Link is a complete psychopath. That's all we can do with the Picto Box for now, so next up is the Tingle Tuner. This was my very first live stream at the time, so I didn't quite have the best layout, but at least it's all visible. For the most part, the Tingle Tuner is just a simple assistant unless you're a speedrunner, but there's quite a bit of optional side quests too. And your first Tingle quest can be done right here on Windfall Island. Observe the mailbox with Tingle, walk to the 3 benches in the order that he tells you, and then find 2 hidden rupees on the Game Boy Advance screen. Then for your final task, you'll Tingle Bomb the jail door for 20 rupees and an achievement. The other Tingle Tuner task here is even easier, but it can't be completed until after you clear Dragon Roost Cavern, which is our next destination. Coincidentally enough, our next original task for Retro Achievements also involves the Tingle Tuner. In Dragon Roost Cavern, you have to use the Tingle Balloon power-up to cross this gap. But that's not the only moment where Tingle gets to shine, because we need to find every treasure chest in every dungeon from here on out. The only missable one was Forsaken Fortress, so every temple from here on out can be done at your own leisure. And while most of the chests will be easy enough to find thanks to the map and compass, each of the 5 primary temples will contain a hidden treasure chest that can only be uncovered with a Tingle Bomb and will contain a Tingle statue. But the Tingle Bomb rule only applies to the originals. If you're playing a randomizer or playing the HD version, you can just use a regular bomb instead. More importantly though, Dragon Roost Cavern is the one dungeon that actually has 2 hidden Tingle chests. But the 2nd reward isn't nearly as exciting. Moving on to the boss, this is the part where a bunch of Retro Achievements fans are now expecting standard damageless boss achievements. because it's such a common staple of retro achievements that I even recently updated my YouTube channel banner to make a joke about it. But to my surprise, there's not a single damageless boss challenge in this entire set. Instead, you just have a bunch of mini-boss battles with separate achievements, and all but 2 bosses are just a standard battle. So after our victory, we get the first pearl, learn the Wind God's Requiem, and make our way south. This is when we can finally start mapping out our sea chart with bait, so we make sure to do so for each sector that we pass through. Also, if you're not doing a 3-heart run, this is a good chance to get your second bottle, but for me, I have to ignore it for now. Once we make it to Forest Haven and get the Deku Leaf, we can now unlock the single most time-consuming part of this game as far as 100%ing it goes, the Figurine Gallery. Once you fully upgrade the Picto box, which requires a Firefly found here in Forest Haven, you can submit a photo of an NPC or an enemy to Karlov here, and it'll turn it into a figurine. Sounds simple on paper, but it is a massive grind. You can only hold 3 photos at a time, you can only submit 1 at a time, you have to wait an entire day for him to finish one, and Karlov gets a bit picky at times and will occasionally reject a perfectly fine looking photo. Most importantly though, 16 of them are missable. So here's your cheat sheet if needed, and will remind you of missables as they appear in the game. Many of them are straightforward, but to clarify a few of them, the Wizrobe and the Dark Nut have exclusive variants, so make sure to not confuse them with the standard enemies. While the Elite Wizrobe is a mini-boss that only appears in a single room in the Wind Temple, thus making it missable, the Mighty Dark Nut, which only appears in Hyrule, contrary to popular belief, is not missable. Worst case scenario, you can revisit Phantom Ganon's maze and find one deep within there. Then because Zephos only ever appears in a cutscene, submitting a photo of Cyclos will get you both of them in a single figurine. On a similar note, submitting a photo of Tetra will get you the rest of the pirate crew as separate figurines. And while Tetra has a very narrow window of capture normally, she can also easily be obtained at the beginning of New Game Plus. Then for the legendary photos, you don't capture them, but rather you purchase them from Lenzo later on, and what he sells you depends on the phase of the moon. Then for Knuckle, he is missable, but he's also considered completely optional because he only appears after you complete an optional Tingle Tuner side quest. Naturally, I'm going to get his figurine anyways, and the only thing you have to do to not worry about him being missable is not submit him last. And then the single most important missable to remember is going to be Kogali, who for whatever reason disappears right around the time of the Earth Temple. I'll be completely honest and say that I don't know the exact moment that he disappears for good, so to play it safe, I'm just going to say to make sure to get the photo before you play the Earth God's lyric for Medley the first time. On a final note, when you go to New Game Plus, your figurine progress will carry over, and you'll start with the Deluxe Picto box if you got it in the first quest. But if you miss a missable figurine on New Game Plus as well, then too bad because there is no third loop. But really it's just one giant grind more than anything else, and you can easily get everything on the first loop, so long as you get the Deluxe Picto box before you defeat either the Helmrock King or Cyclos. And with all that established, back to the main game. As we make our way back to the forest, we can stop by Hollow and give him 15 Bokobaba seeds that we've amassed from defeating the plants to get a blue potion and an achievement. Then in the Forbidden Woods, we once again need to open up every single treasure chest in the dungeon. But even with a map and compass available, it took me a little bit to find them all because I was just struggling with the up and down portion of the navigation a bit. In the process of finding them all though, I noticed 2 interesting details about Tingle. One is that he can actually call out to you without pressing anything on the Game Boy Advance screen, and 2 is that he'll outright refuse to let you use a bomb or other power-up if it'll either cause a major sequence break or allow you to choose a major progression puzzle. I was able to use a bomb to help with an optional chest, but for anything essential, he'll say that you're fated to figure it out on your own. After finding everything including the second Tingle statue, you're going to want to get the final warp pot and then leave the temple. You want to get some forest water because we have to defeat the boss via the Easter egg. So we head back, warp back to the boss, knock him down, and then sprinkle some forest water on him for an easy one-hit KO. After getting the second pearl, I make sure to grab a Firefly because before too much longer, we're back at Windfall Island. Since we already did the first half of the Picto Box side quest, we can now give Lenzo the Firefly and upgrade it to the Deluxe Picto Box. And then next up is our second Missable Speedrun achievement, considered by many to be the hardest in the set. The timer itself isn't impossibly hard if you're decent with the rope controls, but rather the challenge lies in the fact that you have to completely rethink how you would do the rope course. We'll break it down into 2 categories or lines of ropes, the ones that go from the start to the second set of boxes, and the ones from there up until the end. As you can see, I wasn't incredibly fast, I made a bunch of small mistakes, and I didn't know at the time that the wind direction does have a slight effect on the ropes, but I still got it, special thanks to the support from my Twitch chat. Looking at some of the more optimized runs by different players, with a good angle and some momentum, you can properly line up the first 3 ropes for the first half, and better line up the 2 in the second half. Normally when you need to completely change directions, you need 3 full swings to make it to the next rope, but if you're really in a pinch, you can sometimes make it in 2 with a good angle and position. After getting the bombs, this is also a good time to unlock a permanent discount on several Tingle items by standing on this awning with the tuner out. But there's no rush, and obviously I got it much later. Speaking of Tingle, as we make our way back to Outset Island, this is the earliest that we can complete 2 additional Tingle tasks. If you have the Tingle tuner active while you're on Outset Island, Knuckle will appear to scold Tingle, and then you have to go on a small scavenger hunt for Knuckle. The first assigned task is to visit the outdoor bath, which is located right by Grandma's house. Then you have to find the ladder that nobody uses, which is located right by the watchtower. Your next stop is going to be the largest rock at the top of the mountain, which is right here, and then you have the Leap of Faith, where you jump off where the bridge used to be, and land in this area between the rock pillar and the cliff. After that, Knuckle rewards you with a hand-me-down tuner, which allows you to purchase several items from him. Then our second Tingle task is going to be a lot faster. Just make it to the cliff here, place a Tingle bomb, and then break the pot for 100 rupees. Next we make our way back to the woods to find a wallet upgrade, and then bring a ferry from there back to Grandma to get access to the elixir soup, which is so useful that keeping a steady supply of it pretty much eliminated any and all pressures of the 3-heart run. After grabbing the third and final pearl, we have quite a bit of sailing ahead of us, so not only is now a good time to start mapping out parts of your sea chart, but is also a good time for the player to grab both the magic upgrade and the 2 bomb upgrades. Speaking of bombs, our next missable achievement is going to be in Tower of the Gods. You have to defeat the Dark Nut mini-boss without using your sword, minus a single parry attack. L target, wait for the opening, get our parry, and then spam our bombs over and over until he's defeated. Then moving on, as we begin grabbing all the chests in the area, you may notice on the Tingle tuner that Tingle mentions pages to find. And while it feels like there would be an achievement for doing so, it's not actually possible to make an achievement around this because RetroAchievements is effectively a memory viewer, and there's nothing about this task that saves in the game's memory. But of course, we still make the personal decision to find them all anyways. So after finding all of the chests, next up is the boss, and while it looks like this will be a missable figurine opportunity, you can actually photograph it before and after the battle too, so it's not missable. So next up is Hyrule, and we have another missable which will be made even harder because I'm on my 3-heart run, defeating every enemy in the Great Hall without healing. If you have it, go ahead and drink your soup beforehand, that way you can keep an attack boost. For pretty much every single combat challenge achievement in this game, you have 2 main approaches, either very cautious or very aggressive. And the key to success for all of them is finding out when to swap between the 2. Sometimes you just want to go so fast that the enemies don't have a chance to attack in the first place, and other times you're going to want to hang back, spamming your boomerang and arrows as needed. You also got to be careful with your parry attacks, because you don't want to get caught up in the terrain or another enemy. If you need to get any supplies from the pots or the Wonder Balls, just shoot an arrow from a distance, because you don't want to find yourself almost done with this achievement and then accidentally walk into a heart. And while there are a lot of enemies in this room, by keeping the enemies mostly isolated, I was slowly but surely able to pick them off one by one, and I was able to complete it on my first attempt. I was able to complete it on my second attempt. What makes that first attempt even funnier is that was the very last enemy too. After finishing up here, we go ahead and snap a missable photo of Cyclos, and then defeat him to learn the Balad of Gales, allowing us to warp to multiple locations for convenience. After confirming that Karlov accepts the photo, we grab the Song of Passing at Windfall Island, which means we may as well cover 2 other missables while we're here. For a Lot Sniper, you need to win an auction for 75 rupees or less, and while there's a treasure chart that starts at 5 rupees, I was still able to get the achievement from a Joy Pendant, which starts at 30. Make a bid as quickly as possible, and then raise it to greater than 10% of the current bid in order to surprise the other bidders for 15 seconds. Time your next bid to appear right before the end of those 15 seconds, and after your 4th time stun locking them, the prize will be yours. And then the other missable is hardly even a missable, because you'd have to go out of your way to mess this one up. By now you might have enough red and green chew jelly to give to the potion shop owner, but the blue chews are incredibly rare, and once you obtain their jelly, they will never drop it again even after they respawn. You only need to give them 15, but we went ahead and grabbed them all. And when the time comes, simply don't sell it to Beetle, and you don't have to worry about it being missable. In fact, don't sell any of your spoils to Beetle, because there's always someone else somewhere willing to offer more. But on with the adventure, we head back to the Forsaken Fortress, making sure to pick up the second wallet upgrade on Northern Fairy Island along the way. And then we now have 1 of 2 opportunities to snap a photo of Phantom Ganon. But then we also have a missable achievement that has to be done in the first battle. You defeat him without L targeting, equipping a bottle, or being resurrected. To clarify though, you can still rotate the camera with the C-stick. You can either have your tennis match without L targeting, or wait for him to attack on the ground. It's not a difficult challenge by any means, but for many players including myself, this achievement is unfortunately bugged, and you can't get it to start tracking correctly unless you save and reset first. This second visit to the Forsaken Fortress is also a good time to get a permanent discount on Tingle's Tings by standing in this pot here with the tuner out. We then make it to the Helmrock King for a missable figurine opportunity, defeat him, make our escape from Ganondorf, and then have another missable photo opportunity shortly after in Hyrule with Tetra, and her figurine will get you the other 6 members of the pirate crew as well. After this section we warp to Mother and Child Isles for the fire and ice arrows, which in turn opens up our final 2 speedrun achievements. They might seem intimidating at first, but both of these were significantly easier than the Rope Course 2 speedrun. Starting with the volcano one, I was far from optimal as I climbed my way up, glided across the gap, dropped down, glided some more, and then managed to whiff more attacks than I actually landed, and was still within the time limit to unlock the achievement. And then depending on your familiarity with the game, the ice one will be either slightly easier or slightly harder. You do have to get used to the sliding physics, but you also have some bigger skips available. With the help of a northern wind and the Deku Leaf, we can skip a small section here and then continue to utilize gliding as we make our way to the center. Then instead of climbing up the steps, we equip the Skull Hammer and perform a series of jump attacks to get up faster. Then once we're inside, we can save a massive chunk of time by performing a double roll through the wind, and then just like that, we have no more speedrun achievements in the set. Or if you really feel like breaking things, you can exploit the Tingle balloon by hovering near the very end of the timer, and then restarting from up top, giving you all the time in the world to make it to the chest. Unless you're going for a top leaderboard time though, this definitely isn't necessary. But what is necessary is that as we make our way back to Roost Island, we need to get a photo of Kigali before awakening Medley, because he's quite possibly the single easiest figurine to miss, because nobody really expects him to just up and disappear. Then once we make it to the Earth Temple mini-boss, we have an achievement for defeating the Stelphos with only the Skull Hammer and without being resurrected. And what I really like about this one is that it teaches you that you can one-shot the head with a hammer, something I never knew before. Then our next achievement will naturally be finding every single treasure chest. I expected the chests to be harder as I progressed to the later temples, but this one was actually by far the easiest one to find everything in. Light puzzles made up a majority of them, and even the Tingle chest was in a pretty predictable spot. Meanwhile, the boss of this temple is not a missable figurine, however, it's going to be a lot faster and easier to just get it done here and now. After clearing the Earth Temple, the Wind Temple is going to be next, and the mini-boss room has 2 missables that you need to be aware of. The Wizard mini-boss has a unique variant which can only be photographed in this room for a figurine, and then the silliest achievement in the entire set is going to be in this battle, because you not only have to win the battle without resurrecting, but you have to be wearing the iron boots the entire time. This is one of those achievements that looks like it's going to be miserable, but I had so much fun doing it that it's actually one of my favorite achievements in the set. The easiest way to get around is going to be by backflipping or side hopping, and it's a lot faster than you would think. The big thing to know for this achievement though, is that by defeating the mini-boss, you get the achievement then and there, meaning you can take out the boots right afterwards and clear out the rest of the room. So simply ignore the Dark Nuts by outspeeding them, shoot anything that comes at you with the bow, and prioritize the boss and you'll have this achievement in no time. Then next up we have our final dungeon related treasure chest hunt, and with the map and compass alone, I was able to figure out most of them without too much of a problem. And even though our final Tingle chest was probably the hardest one to find, it still wasn't too cryptic. However, there's a single chest in this temple that had me guessing longer than I'd like to admit. In this room here, you have 2 different treasure chests. The first one you'll bind with no problem, but for the second one, every time you break one of these floor panels, new enemies will appear, and then you have to break every single one to spawn the other chest. So after that, we move on to the boss, which isn't a missable photo op, and before too much longer, our Master Sword is fully awakened, meaning now we need to find all 8 pieces of the Triforce, and only 2 of the shards are going to lead us to optional achievements outside of the standard progression. The first one will be from the Private Oasis. After the initial hide-and-seek game where you earn a heart piece and then give her a joy pendant for some rupees, giving her 20 more will reward you with a cabana deed, and then another 20 after that for the Hero's Charm, which was replaced with Treasure Chest 45 in Wind Waker HD. After making our way into our new home, you'll notice a sliding puzzle up on the wall, and we're going to have to solve all 16 of them for an achievement. Each puzzle solved gives you 50 rupees, with a bonus 200 at the end, which really isn't all that much when you realize that that's just over the cost of deciphering 2 Triforce charts. And for the people who watch my videos to use as a retro achievements guide, there's a good chance they clicked on this video solely because they're stuck on the sliding puzzles. So let's learn how to do them. No matter the game, there's only 2 things you need to know to easily be able to solve one: what the final picture looks like, and where the empty space is supposed to be. And in this case, the free space is always going to be in the top right, and you have reference photos for the completed picture right nearby. With all that in mind, we'll break these down into 5 main sections. Starting from the left, we have our first column followed by our second column, and then from the bottom right, we'll make row 1 and 2 before sliding the final 3 pieces until completing the puzzle. The big framing issue that most people have initially when they try these is that they instinctively want to just throw the piece into the correct position, but you need to actually prepare to slide them in from the adjacent spot or else you can't utilize the free space afterwards to continue the puzzle. And the best visual example of this is going to be when I get to the rows, because now on a much smaller scale, you can see that the plan is to line things up so that I complete both slots at the same time, thus allowing me to utilize the free space afterwards to prepare the same trick for the next row, and then move those final 3 into the correct position. But going back to the beginning steps of these puzzles, fundamentally the columns work the same way. But if you really need to oversimplify things, don't think of it as pushing the blocks, but rather think of it like you're creating a conga line where you get all the pieces of a column or row to connect, and then march their way into the correct spots all at once. And while I personally prefer to do 4 at a time for the columns, you can still keep everything in pairs of 2 all throughout if you'd like. And once you get the first 1 or 2, the rest will come pretty easily. Just be aware that in some of the later puzzles, you have some similar looking pieces. After completing all 15 puzzles and getting our achievement, our next destination is Outset Island because it's time for the Savage Labyrinth, aka the Pit of 50 Trials. For the main story, you only need to reach floor 30 for the Triforce chart, but we need to make it to 50 for a heart piece since we're playing the PAL version. In the NTSC version, you instead get a treasure chart, and in the Japanese version, you only get 10 rupees because the heart piece here for PAL is instead under Grandma's house. And if that wasn't confusing enough for you, Wind Waker HD players instead get the Hero's Charm that we got from trading all those joy pendants. Much more importantly though, we have a Missable achievement for clearing all 50 floors without losing a total of more than 15 hearts and without using any magic. And in my case, I'm still on my 3 heart run. The first 30 floors weren't actually too bad for the Triforce chart, so I decided to save and give it a go for floor 50 afterwards. If I was better prepared and had the knowledge that I do now, I do believe I could have made it on the first try, and it's definitely possible on a 3 heart run. You're allowed to heal because it just tracks total damage taken, and you can use a grappling hook to pickpocket resources from enemies too, which was something I completely forgot about at the time. My strategy for the most part was to just use the bow, but it turns out that my greatest ally was also my greatest enemy, because in the heat of the moment while L-targeting and shooting, I instinctively tried to shield an attack, which instead swapped me over to an elemental arrow, which I proceeded to accidentally fire, meaning I've invalidated the achievement because I used magic. But as devastating as that sounds, it's really no big deal, because I have to make 2 trips down here anyways. Remember a bit earlier when I said that for the 3 heart challenge, I hit my heart piece limit pretty quickly? That means that if I did make it to the end this quickly, I wouldn't be able to open up the treasure chest anyways because it would complete a 4th heart. So on my second mandated visit here, I can give it another go and I'll have more hearts to work with. Which means that for now, we wrap up the rest of our Triforce hunt and make our way back to Hyrule. In the basement will be our first opportunity to snap a photo of the mighty Dark Nut, and then as we progress, we have to rebattle 4 bosses. Despite the rebattles all being in black and white, you can photograph them like normal, and this is how I'm able to get the Goma and Calidemos figurines on a first playthrough. Before too much longer, you'll find yourself in a maze, and this will be your only other opportunity to photograph Phantom Ganon if you missed him back in the Forsaken Fortress. If you missed the figurine opportunity here too, then he's gone for good. After making it to the very end, we get our light arrows and unlock a warp back to the Forsaken Fortress. Before long, we have to clear a final hallway of enemies, and this is your best chance to photograph a mighty Dark Nut if you missed it in the basement. If you don't get it now, you'll have to go back to Phantom Ganon's maze and find it deep within there. And then next up is Puppet Ganon, which is a missable figurine opportunity. You also have a missable achievement for defeating him without ever leaving the water. The first 2 phases more or less play out exactly the same, but the heart of the challenge lies in phase 3. He moves at random, a single attack can easily knock you out of the water, and you have to stand still to aim your bow, leaving you wide open if he heads your way. But don't worry, we have a few tricks up our sleeve. The iron boots will reduce your knockback drastically and keep you grounded in the water area, and while many of you are probably aware of using a spin attack or bombs on the head to stun him, we have an even better weapon in our arsenal, one that most players would never even think to try. The secret weapon to defeating Puppet Ganon and getting this achievement is the all-purpose bait. That's right, whether it's fish, rats, or giant puppet snakes, this bait is indeed all-purpose. Once he's a safe distance away from you, unequip the iron boots, place a bomb first if you'd like, and then scatter the bait and run away. Then just line up your shot, and rinse and repeat. And before too much longer, the single hardest boss achievement is finally complete. But then that bitch-ass Karlov wouldn't accept any of my photos! And because I decided to wait until after the battle to submit the photos, that means that the way out was locked. At the time I figured it would be okay to save and reset to exit, because I figured that there was no way that Karlov would reject all 3 photos. But because he did, and because Puppet Ganon is now completely gone, I now have to replay the entire game just for a single photo. Nah, I'm just kidding. I made a backup save in the basement because I thought that the Mighty Dark Nuts were missable figurines at the time, so we're good. So while I did lose a bit of progress, I was ultimately able to talk some sense into Karlov the second time around. So this is a good example of why you should always make backup saves when achievement hunting. So after completely averting that crisis, and in turn reaffirming my paranoia that tells me to make an absurd number of backup saves at all times, Ganondorf himself was just a very simple winding down into the completion of our 3-heart run, which means that now the completionist portion can begin. Since I was still craving some combat, our next stop is Shark Island, where we have a missable achievement for clearing the gauntlet without getting hit more than 10 times. You may get caught off guard by the sheer number of enemies the first time, but the challenge itself is perfectly fair. And once again, your arrows, boomerang, and shield are all going to come in handy. But there's a really interesting balancing act to this area too. The mini-balloons will spawn infinitely until you defeat all the larger enemies, but you can't just ignore them because then you'll get overwhelmed by them in a challenge that's solely based on number of hits. Additionally, if you take too long, you may get overwhelmed by the larger enemies too, so while the safe spam strats are effective, you need to find opportunities to be aggressive too. Then when the Dark Knights are in a group, if you can perform a jumping parry attack, you can potentially break multiple helmets at once. And then with that lucky break, I was able to arrow spam my way to victory. And if you thought that that was a test of attrition, next up, we're heading back to Outset Island. If you haven't given 10 Knight's Crest to Orca to learn the Hurricane Spin, go ahead and do so. And then we have the achievement for the sparring match, where you have to land 1,000 hits before he hits you 3 times. And my go-to strategy is to wait for him to attack, jump attack, perform several quick spins, and then make a judgment call for when to shield and retreat. His attacks are heavily telegraphed, but landing an attack as he draws his weapon will delay the hit slightly, allowing me to react accordingly with a shield. I took a better safe than sorry approach, and gave up a few hits on him in order to ensure that I eventually made it. The only downside is that because I hit every tier reward all at once, I don't get them all and just get the piece of heart. But no big deal, and now it's time for the collectathon. Every heart piece, side quest, treasure chart, all going to be collected. And quite a few of these were things that I only ever obtained for the very first time on this playthrough, such as the heart piece from the Withering Tree side quest and a number of the specialty charts. Retro Achievements includes a few additional tasks as well, a high score in the boat race course, and obtaining all the treasures from platforms, submarines, and big octos. Don't forget that the big octo is a missable figurine, and don't forget that many of the platforms have more than one treasure chest, so make sure to defeat every enemy, including the cannons. Then for the hidden caves, the most confusing one is going to be an Ice Ring Isle, because you have a cave within a cave by where the wind blows. And I would highly recommend players use the Wind Waker randomizer tracker, because even if you're not doing a randomizer, the interactive checklist is incredibly helpful. The tracker also showed me that there were a number of chests remaining that weren't required for retro achievements, so I went ahead and grabbed all those too. But that still wasn't enough, and I wanted to do more, so I found more. Chances are, the average player salvaged treasure with a grappling hook only a handful of times, and they were completely over it by the end of the Triforce shard hunt. Well, we weren't just going to dig up all 49 treasure chart large rings, but all of the small ones too. Counting all the salvageable ring varieties, I dug up every chest for a grand total of 148 rings. But then you also have the light ring chart, and the rings revealed here respawn every full moon, but I made sure to grab each one at least once. Which then begs the question of, what are you even going to do with all those rupees, because that's way more than you're going to need for the membership cards and legendary photographs. The answer is that we're going to decorate. After obtaining every item from the trading quest, the most expensive one available to us is a Zunari statue at 200 rupees. So with 14 spots outside Windfall Island, 23 spots inside various Windfall buildings, and 2 spots on the private oasis, we spend a grand total of 7,800 rupees in order to beautify the place with these glorious Zunari statues. So after tying up some loose ends and finishing up the figurine gallery, we just have one task left to do. It's time to go back to the Savage Labyrinth for our final heart piece and our final achievement. Learning from my mistake the first time, the very first thing I did upon arriving was drain all of my magic so I wouldn't accidentally use any. Constant motion combined with some standard hack slash and parry attacks got me through the first 10 floors completely untouched. Floor 11 is when the boomerang first came into play, and it also kept me completely safe on floor 13 with the Boko Babas. The Mothulas came out on floor 15, and I made quick work of them with a bow, but floor 18 is when I made my first mistake, taking a hit and losing my double damage boost. I make it through floor 19 with a bow and a lucky dodge, and then on floor 20, I avoid the recovery heart so I can better keep track of how much health I've lost. Floor 21 brings Whiz Ropes, which we naturally rush as quickly as possible, and then we carefully maneuver our way around the Armos and Armos Knights to come out unscathed. Floor 24 can be completely cheesed with the boomerang from a distance, but do as I say, not as I do. Then I take another hit because I wasn't paying attention to a smaller enemy, but I make quick work of the next few floors by making wise decisions on enemy priorities. And while I had a strong start on floor 29, I got a bit sloppy, but 1.5 hearts out of 15 is pretty decent for floor 30. Though I can't celebrate too early because the optional floors ahead of us only ramp up in difficulty. Floor 31 brings us redeads, so we need to avoid getting stunned, leaving us with 2 main strategies. You can either spam bombs just outside of their range, or get the drop on them to land a jump attack right before they stun you. And as some of you may have noticed, I completely missed a light in the room, which I could have used to stun them, but being able to defeat them without light will still come in handy. Then for the blue bubbles, because I don't currently have access to the Deku Leaf, I have to use a hookshot and sword attack. The next few floors are easy enough because you can just stun all the enemies with the light, but then I take a few hits on the Mothulas, and on the next floor, the redeads and moblins prove to be a deadly combo. Then to make matters even worse, I make more mistakes on both a Mothula and a moblin later on, but at the very least I successfully boomerang my way through the Stalfos. And while 4 out of 15 hearts worth of damage may sound like I'm worrying way too much, the final floors are a league all on their own, and if you're not on your toes the entire time, the damage can really start racking up. Floor 41 brings us 24 mini-blins, which thankfully only cost us half a heart thanks to some invincibility frames and quick spins that bailed me out. Floor 42 brings us 30 choo-choos, 10 of which are electric. The bombs work wonders here though, because the stun radius on them is way larger than you think, allowing me to easily clear this floor damageless. But then next up is one of the easiest run killers if you're not prepared. 5 Wizrobes, and as you might imagine, dodging 15 fireballs all at once isn't the easiest task. So I just went as quickly as possible to try to minimize the onslaught, but this was easily my worst floor yet, costing me an entire heart and a half. Then on floor 44 I take 2 hits from one of the 16 enemies hiding in the darkness, but I guess it could have been much worse. But floor 45 went much better than expected. I bombed the first re-dead from a distance, and then accidentally learned in the process that I can shoot a detached Stelthos head with a bow. And then with them out of the way, it became much easier to pick off the remaining re-deads. On floor 46 we outrun the Darknuts while picking off the Moblins, and then arrow spam our way to victory unharmed. Then we have 2 Darknuts, 3 Wizrobes, and an electric barrier. Thankfully I was able to pick off one of the Wizrobes pretty quickly, because I eventually got trapped, but was able to regain my footing, only costing me half a heart. Floor 48 was easy enough because my bombs combined with the bomb flowers made stunning them pretty easy, and the only damage taken was from my own stupidity. So now we're at our final combat floor, which I didn't realize at the time due to losing count. We have 4 Darknuts surrounded by fire-breathing statues. I risk a few hits to parry off the helmets, which went well, and then after picking off the one whose armor I broke instead of the helmet, I arrow spam my way to victory, making sure to finish out the challenge in style. So with less than 9 hearts worth of damage taken, we have a very satisfying conclusion to the end of our Wind Waker mastery journey. For the main retro achievement set itself, I enjoyed it for what it is, and while the game itself definitely gets a bit grindy, it is a textbook example of why you don't need to complete everything in a game and why achievements are always optional. It was an oddly relaxing grind to finally commit to after all of these years of enjoying the game. But practically speaking, most players are better off just getting the beat status on this one while casually enjoying a few side quests. And while the set itself is perfectly fine as is and does exactly what I expected it to, when you look at some of the finer details, there are a few additions that I wouldn't mind. Most of the minigames were covered in the set, but several were completely omitted. On Windfall Island, Dampa has a minigame for wrangling his pigs, and upon success, you'll get either a purple rupee in the original game, or a treasure chart in Wind Waker HD. And if you feed a fish on a sector that you've already mapped out on your sea chart, you can play a shooting minigame for some easy rupees, and for the sake of the video, I made sure to get a perfect score. Then when I was grabbing all the optional treasure chests, I noticed that Roost Island had no chest achievements tied to them, meaning that even the mini gauntlet in the area isn't required for set mastery. And speaking of Roost Island, a simple but fun original achievement you could add is for knocking down this chest without the bow, because any opportunity to make the pair slightly less underwhelming is always welcome. But of course, those are all nitpicks at the end of the day, because the set is fantastic and goes completely above and beyond with things such as Tingle tuner support. So with that, that's all I got for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and hype for more Retro Achievements content, and until next time.
Splish, 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 splish.